everyone. Welcome to our Enneagram series called The Numbers Talk, where we sit down with different people with different Enneagram numbers so that we can get a feel, a sense, and a flavor of what it's like to be them. And so today I have Miss Katie Riley that has agreed to join me to talk about herself. As we were exchanging text messages, setting up a time to do this, she said, she could basically talk about herself all day. So, and she was saying she was hoping that Kyle was okay with editing about 8 or 9 hours of video.
Sure.
Because it's not that hard for you to talk about yourself, which is awesome. And we know each other through, I was just saying to Katie before we started that it's been about a year that we've been as close as we've been, and then we did a teacher training together last fall, and my daughter works with you at McKay's Ice Cream here in Cochrane. And so Katie and I spent a fair bit of time together, and you're just one of my favorite people, Katie. So thank you for coming on.
You're very welcome.
And why don't you start, Katie, by telling us what was your introduction to the Enneagram? How did you get into this? Because you're kind of as geeky and nerdy as me with all this info. You love this stuff.
Yeah, I really enjoy most things about personality and the motivations as to why people do the things that they do, especially like when you think about coming up through life, experiences from childhood and how that affects us later on, and even things that happen on a daily basis. But my introduction to the Enneagram was the teacher training.
Okay.
I think I'd probably seen things on the evenings that you would put on here, but I could never come to them.
Mm-hmm.
But it really came on my radar on the teacher training.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what is this? Downloaded the app and went to the
Mm-hmm.
websites
Mm-hmm.
and did a bunch of tests, and everyone, 999, sorry.
Oh no,
Was I supposed
spoiler
to announce
alert.
it? Spoiler alert,
Yeah.
999.
Katie is an Enneagram 9. So that was my next question. What was your journey like to find your number? So was it pretty easy? Did you fall there right away?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when you first kind of went through all the numbers, I was like, yeah, that could be a little bit me. That could be a little bit me. That could be a little bit me. And then I was like, oh, is this kind of like horoscope where maybe it's a little too general?
Mm-hmm.
And then I went away and looked at it and I was like, oh, okay.
And then you found out that one of the features of the Enneagram 9 is that they feel like they have a little bit of all numbers within them.
Yeah.
And it's why they sit at the top of the Enneagram symbol. Sometimes the Enneagram 9 is called the jewel in the crown of the Enneagram because they are very intuitive, very empathic, and have the ability to truly understand what it would feel like to be in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
And because they have that really high sense and ability to be able to do that, they can see themselves in everybody. However, and maybe you can speak to this, often 9s can't report or reflect very well what it's like to be them. They are very good at holding space for other people, showing up for other people, doing things for other people. 9s can get a bad rap for being lazy, and I've yet to meet a lazy 9. I would like the Enneagram world to just kind of do away with that, because there is a slothness, Katie's got the sloth cut today, to the 9, but it's more in spirit than it is in actual doing. So 9s do a tremendous amount for other people, but kind of at the end of the day, they might be unable to sort of see what's deeper inside for them. Can you speak to that a little?
Yeah, I suppose it's lazy to myself. If I have tasks to do that's required of me by other people, so for example in the workplace or for friends, then I will work day and night to make sure it's done. But when it comes to myself, that's where I'm really lazy. And it's, I don't know why, honestly. But I know that other people get kind of brought into that. So like my husband has become kind of an extension to me. So I'm kind of lazy with regards to us. But yeah, I'll do anything for anyone else.
So you immigrated here to Canada 6 years ago from the UK?
Yeah, 6.5. It'll be 7 at the end of this year.
Almost 7 years. And so before you came to Canada, your work over there was what?
I was a counsellor in mental health services. Yeah.
And how fitting, right? Getting into the lives, the worlds, and the hearts of others is really one of the abilities and capabilities of nines. So to hold space for others' stories, pain, trauma, suffering is one of the great things that nines are able to do.
Yeah, and I always thought it was kind of an accident, and maybe I was guided in that direction, which I suppose isn't uncommon for nines. I always say I fell into the caring profession. I just needed a job because college didn't work out, and a friend of mine worked in a nursing home, and it was like, we're looking for people, just come in for an interview. And I wouldn't have hired me. When I turned up for that, I think I had like a Gap hoodie on, jeans, I had a bandana on, I didn't have makeup on, like I had made zero effort, and I think I even walked there, like for about 40 minutes. And I often giggle, and I was like, I think they literally checked my pulse and said, yeah, you can have a job. Yeah. So they must have been desperate.
That was all that was required.
Yeah, but it worked out. I enjoyed it. I loved working with people. I loved caring for the elderly. I loved singing songs with my patients. And there was a little part of me that there's a little justice and like a bit of a righteousness. So if people came in who weren't as nice to the residents as I was very regularly complaining, like they need to be fired. To the matron, they need to be fired. They're not very good at this. And then I was told if they fired everyone I didn't like, there'd be no staff. So yeah.
And so one of the let's break down what the Enneagram 9 looks like in sort of its chief features and some of the characteristics, and you can chime in if you like, if something speaks to you. So the 9 sits in the anger triad, and it sits between the 8 on one side and the 1 on the other. And so the 8 would be the one that would overdo anger. We can see that with our eyes. We can often sense that someone is angry. When the 8 can be quite explosive with the anger. The 1 on the other side of the 9, they're aware of their anger, but they have a belief that it's just not okay to be angry or to be anything but kind of cool, calm, and collected. So they're aware that the anger's there, but they suppress it down, and so they deny it. So it kind of looks like, them gritting their teeth or just kind of, removing themselves and then maybe exploding behind closed doors. And then the 9 that sits in between those, they are kind of asleep to the anger. They may have like a big blow up kind of once a year or once a decade even. It's very unusual for 9s to show anger, and it's something through work and self-growth and development that 9s really need to work on, is acknowledging that the anger is there, trusting that it's valuable and that it's a resource for mobilization to get them maybe stuck out of a rut. The passion of the 9 is sloth. That's why we gave Katie the sloth cup today. And as I said earlier, it's not so much that the 9s are lazy, that they just are on the couch all the time, narcotized and just numbed out. It's more that the 9 might not be using, it's like right use of energy or right action. And then the call to virtue for the 9 is engagement, and putting their energies in the right place. And Katie already spoke to that she's very good at being righteous for others. Katie works a lot with youth in her job at McKay's Ice Cream. Yeah. And she is involved with the hiring of all the kids. And so she, I've heard you speak before that you're protective of that group of kids, and they're kind of like under Mama Bear's wings. And so 9s have that justice on behalf of others, but sometimes there's in Enneagram language, it's called self-forgetting, and that's where that slothness comes from. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, a couple things. So the first one would be only just kind of the beginning, I suppose, of my journey on the Enneagram, is that it fascinates me that I'm like smack bang in the centre of anger. Yeah. Because I don't always recognise it in myself. And I do notice that if I do become frustrated, is that I can clench my fist, clench my jaw, and I can be like, "Argh," and I'll speak through gritted teeth. It is rare, although probably a little bit more at the moment with COVID. But mostly I just kind of think I can talk myself out of anger very easily, because I'm like, well, why are they doing that? Why are they doing
therapist hat goes on.
Yeah, why are they reacting that way? Well, I guess it's just because they wanted to just go out and do such and such a thing. And so I can justify why people react the way they do, but I don't always justify why I react the way I do. And then I'll just file it away and ignore
And so
it.
using that grace that you are so beautiful at extending to others, to turn it back around on yourself it's difficult work for the 9. It really is.
And too much work sometimes.
Yeah. There comes the sloth part, right?
It's like, oh, never mind. Just ignore it. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you just a series of questions that are kind of 9-ish questions that we're going to flush out some of the things that come up for 9s as patterns, and some of their things that when they're less resourceful, and then when they're feeling more resourceful, kind of what that looks like for the Enneagram 9. So one of the things that a 9 is beautiful at is, and sometimes they even get called this, they mostly get called the Peacemaker, but they also get called the Mediator. They're very good at, if there's conflict between two parties, the 9 is one of the most beautiful people to help deflate and reconcile, bring reconciliation to something, to conflict. So how easy is it for you, Katie, to see many sides of an issue?
It's very easy for me to see everyone's side, and easy for me to try and explain that to someone else. Like you mentioned earlier, I do work with a lot of youth, but just throughout my life, is if there is any kind of, I suppose I'm better on a one-to-one. Like when someone comes to me and they're like, oh, such bad is doing my head in, or whatever. I'm very good at going, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this is the reason that they might have done that? And then the other person is encouraged to think from a different perspective. Doesn't always work, but I try. But that's another thing about learning about the Enneagram was, when I was in the UK, I trained to be a workplace mediator as part of like an add-on to my role. I did a lot of different roles in one. Not uncommon for me to want to do as many things to help as many people. But yeah, mediator was one. And so I do find naturally in my life that I become the person in the middle. Although being in this same room as conflict makes me physically uncomfortable. Like I will be like, oh, just ignore it. Like it makes me feel, physically uncomfortable. Like I mentioned, I'll watch UFC. I enjoy watching UFC, but it will occasionally give me heartburn. And it's like, and it's because I'm so tense.
That's fascinating.
I find it easier to diffuse something after the fact, because there is also
processing.
Because there is also a part of me that's like, I have to let those people argue. Like if they don't do that and things get left unsaid, sometimes can be worse. Or is it my business? That's the other part. It's like, is this my business? Do they want my help? Are they not just going to shout at me? And then that would just not be fun.
I've heard it put before that 9s don't want the conflict to be about them.
Yeah.
But they're generally okay when the conflict is external to them. If they have any part of that, they're kind of like out the back door. They're out of there. But if it's about other people, then that's really where their gifting comes, is they can insert themselves, usually quite gracefully and humbly, in a way that the presence of a 9 is just one of the greatest things. I think all 3 numbers actually that live in the anger triad, there's just something really grounding about all 3 numbers, the 8, the 9, and the 1. And they're people that are rooted in the body. They're in the instinctual triad as well. And there's just something like when you're in the presence of a 9, I've often called it, I don't know if Carol Tapsey is a 9, but I get a very similar feeling with you that I do with her. And I think of it as an anchor. I just feel like there's something that's so rooted into the center of the earth when you're with people in this triad, that you just feel like you can kind of be a bit of a hot mess, and they're there to kind of hold that space for you. And I think that's what makes you a great yoga teacher, because especially you are drawn to yin yoga, which is a very grounding, seated practice, right? I mean, how perfect is that? You know?
Yeah, don't get off the floor.
Yeah, you don't have to move at all, but
yeah.
she'll just use her sweet cues to guide you through a grounding practice. Next question, Katie. How opinionated are you?
See, that's a different one, because I find it very difficult to form an opinion. I can be talked into and out of an opinion. So it's very, it's a tough one for me to form a full opinion all of my own. It's also very hard work.
What if it has to do with justice, though? Like,
if there's rules, that there's clear, defined, like black and white rules, then I can pretty much get like, no, that's wrong. However, I can go, but I can understand why someone would break the rules.
Right.
So it might be that I'll have a more solid opinion on a subject, but it could be moved an inch. Like if someone gave me a really good argument.
The example that I'm thinking of, we're in COVID-19 right now, this being June. I remember early on in COVID, you would go to the grocery store. And early on, we were, I think, a little better than we are now that we're in phase 2. We would have to line up, and you'd have to stand on this circle and not anywhere else. And I remember you would go to the grocery store and you'd be quite annoyed.
Yeah.
Like, why can't people just get that this is where we're meant to stand, and this is where the next person stands? And I think a couple times we were having coffee or tea or something, you were like, I just don't get it. And you would get kind of, not outraged, but you'd get a bit whipped up about it. But at the same time, you would probably still extend passion to the person, like, oh, they just might not have seen the circle on the floor. They just might not have known the rules.
And that's me. I can always talk myself out, because it is. I'll be like, it's just so easy to understand. That there is 2 meters, and if there's marks on the floor, like how much easier can things be made for people? And so I can get like, oh, just follow the rules, and then I'll go, but.
And so to tack on to that, would you state your opinion openly and easily? So would you say to somebody like, oh, would you mind moving over? Or, oh, did you see the circle?
I have done. It doesn't always work out well. And I don't know whether I'm maybe too polite sometimes, because I'm not angry, I'm not confrontational. I don't instill fear in people, I don't think. So people tend not to take me seriously. In fact, people will giggle, and I'll be like, well, that was a waste of time. But if it's opinions about anything like bigger, so like political or religious, and it's like, because I do have some core beliefs that I've worked on, for me to share those, I would need to be around people that I could trust. And that I trusted knew me well enough for me to be, I suppose, vulnerable enough to share.
And 9s are a bit like 2s. 9s and 2s are often the 2 numbers that get mixed up the most. And it's because they're very good at serving the needs of others. And 2s have a really big need to be needed and to be liked. And I would say 9s have that too. It's for a little bit different reasons though. So the 2s need to be liked is about believing that they're not worthy of the love. The 9s need to be liked is because if they weren't liked, then that would be conflict. And there would no longer be, because they're the peacemakers, that would be difficult for them to maintain peace if they knew that they were at odds with another person.
I don't like that.
So we talked about your anger, or being in the anger triad. If you were to feel anger, not saying you are or do, how would you express it?
very passively. It's usually, I could bring the example of me and my assistant manager. We get on very well and love each other dearly. And the only time we've ever had actual conflict came in the way that she said something to me, and I was just stressed, and instead of just ignoring it and moving on, I went, well, I could not. And it was like very sarcastic, and it was just not mean, but just very passive aggressive. And that would be me. Is that if, for instance, COVID rules, I'm like, guess people don't see the arrows on the floor. And it'll
so
just
sarcasm,
be like,
which is the
sarcasm.
I think sarcasm is one of the highest forms of passive aggressive behavior. It's like it's getting your point across indirectly, but but there's humor there, and if it's kind of masked in humor, but there's still something kind of prickly underneath it. Yeah, and that makes perfect sense, because it might the passive aggressiveness through sarcasm might be in a way it's not safe to be angry, and maybe if I just kind of write it off as a joke, then it wasn't me being directly conflicting with the person. So that's definitely
sarcasm is my favourite tool.
Yeah, and you are very funny, I think.
I try.
Yeah, you are pretty funny. You were in the teacher training, you were just always cracking us up. Every time we'd have morning circle, you're like, oh, Katie's got the rock, and she's going to say something
and that can often be
even outrageous sometimes.
And that can often be perceived as shallow for
or
me.
Clever. I see it as clever and witty. I think people that can use a sense of humor intelligently, that as a comedian would, I think there's a lot of intellect there. Yeah.
Because coming up doing through counselling training is often my humour and sarcasm would be misconstrued, and it's more that I would use it as avoidance of actually feeling a certain emotion.
What was I going to say about that? Maybe it'll come back to me. Can you speak a little bit about, so the words that get thrown around a lot with the Enneagram 9 are peace and harmony. What does that look like in real time? Like you're in a situation where, how do you find that you harmonize the situation? Maybe it's a work thing or...
Humour is a big one. Smiling. I'll often be very, 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 very kind.
Overly kind?
Yeah, and I often say that to all of my staff, is if you sense someone's going to be a little grumpy or unhappy, is be so nice to someone that they feel bad being mean to you. And that's always been my kind of go-to, is just smile, and be nice, apologise. Although I think sometimes I do apologise too much.
Well, you're in the right country. You've moved to the right nation and land if you're an apologetic person. Yeah. In Canada, it's like you were meant to come
right in. Yeah, the poutine and the apologising.
I know what I was going to say is one thing that, as I was saying earlier, 9s make us feel grounded and safe and anchored, is through sort of the passive aggressiveness. 9s can be very self-deprecating, and they can make you feel quite comfortable because they will be self-effacing and self-deprecating towards themselves, usually with humor. And not that I would say that self-deprecating is a quality that we would strive to have, but when we're in the presence of it, it really does make us feel like I'm with you. So 9s, I find, can really levelize with others by saying, oh gosh, like me too, or like you can just kind of roll with laughing at yourself, poking fun at yourself. And when people do that, I think it makes all of us just feel seen and maybe even understood in some ways.
Yeah, one part of that with regards to work is, if anyone's ever been in to an ice cream shop on a very busy summer day and there's lots of staff in very close quarters, we I often joke about, I don't think I put deodorant on today. I'm really sorry if I stink, guys. And I don't necessarily mean to do that always as it's me, but it's sometimes as a gentle reminder to others.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, did everyone else put deodorant on today?
Passive
Just in case,
aggressive,
because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
going to get real sticky in here.
Yeah.
So it's often diffusing a situation before it gets...
Through yourself, though.
Yeah.
You,
I'll put myself in the line of fire.
Exactly.
A lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose back to that kind of groundedness, whichever the right phrase is, again, in the workplace, because you have to be a certain way, especially in customer service, you've got to be upbeat and positive. And I often say to staff, you know, if you're in a bad mood and you need to leave it somewhere, leave it with me. You know, I can take it. Like, if you don't want to carry that today, give it to me.
Does that ever get burdensome for you, where you feel like you're carrying the weight for others?
It depends sometimes. I suppose it just depends what it is. Mostly no. And I think just because of the line of work that I've been in over the years, I can find it easy sometimes to disconnect. But it's more if I feel I'm letting someone down for not carrying that would be more burdensome.
So each Enneagram number has a need to something. The Enneagram 9's need is the need to avoid. And it could be, typically I think we think of it as avoiding conflict. That would sort of be, you know, an easy one to think of. But it might also mean avoid carrying things for yourself, carrying the burdens or the emotional things that come up for the 9 for the sake of you. Do you relate to that at all? Like, I know that if I called you at 2 a.m. and I needed something, I wouldn't call you because I know you'd say yes, even if you meant no. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But I know that my 9 friend Katie would, when we were first closing the studio, you were one of the first people. What do you need? How can I help? What can I do? But there's a move towards others with an avoidance of maybe caretaking some of the inner things for yourself.
Yeah. It's definitely a massive avoidance of discomfort. And that can be a bit of a catch-all. Like, it's uncomfortable to feel anger or pain or sadness. It's uncomfortable to fail, so I just won't try. It's, you know, it's a lot of effort to get up off the couch and unload the dishwasher, and I don't want to do that. So if I just stay here, nothing changes, even though it does. And that's the hard balance, because I can often retreat to my comfy space of just nothing. And though it feels physically comfortable, nothing happens, nothing changes.
Yeah. I've also heard it said that so 9s can kind of run themselves through that wheel of I don't do anything, nothing changes, and I know I should empty the dishwasher, and on it goes. However, when a 9 gets mobilized, they're unstoppable. I'll just insert a little example here. So my daughter Marley is 16, and you know, we're not meant to try to figure out young kids' numbers. However, there's a lot of 9-ness kind of lurking around Marley, and she's, you know, just through default lives with me and knows a lot about the Enneagram, and she thinks that she's a 9. And we, about a year ago exactly right now, we moved from our family home that we'd been in her entire life to a condo. And you can speak to the stubbornness of a 9. So getting her, that time she was 15, to move, she physically said she wasn't coming with us. And she actually went on holidays with Jill Novak and her best friend Nicole Novak right when we were physically moving our contents of our house down to the condo. And we didn't sell our house. We actually had, you know, my older son living there. And she said, please don't touch my bedroom. Do not touch anything in my bedroom. I'm not going with you. I'm staying up here with Thomas. And so when she was gone on holidays, we moved her things, and I think it was probably, no kidding, like it was about September, October where we began to kind of speak to each other again, and she was just like, she just wasn't having it. So she was very immovable. So nines can be very strong with their no's, actually. When they are convicted with something, when they know, like, nah, I'm not going. And they're like moving a mountain. Anything around stubbornness for you?
Oh, lots of examples for stubbornness, especially if it's rule breaking. If I am, closing the door at the end of the day, I'm closing the door at the end of the day. And evidence has yet to show me that I can trust people that I let in after the door's closed. There's also when COVID struck and I was home for a little while, I got a puzzle, and I enjoy doing jigsaws and doing little bits. And then I left it for a couple of days, and my husband said, "Are you not finishing that puzzle?" And then this is where the real stubborn streak comes in, is that I was torn then because I couldn't finish it because he'd essentially told me to finish it, and I don't like being told what to do. And then I didn't want to finish, and it was just chaos. Yeah, so I just ended up throwing it all back in the box. So I still haven't finished it because I couldn't then finish it.
So nines are unstoppable with their stubbornness, and they're also unstoppable once they get up and going and doing something. They can actually run themselves to exhaustion. Yeah. And we'll talk about your subtype because
I can also give an example for that.
Yeah, please.
My father-in-law loves going on hikes. Never tells me how long it actually is. Often lies.
He probably knows pretty well.
He knows exactly, how long the hike is. But once I've said yes, I'll do something, I'll pretty much see it through to the end. Yeah. It takes a lot, I think, for me to not see something through. Yeah. And I think we once did, it was Taylor Lake, and I think he'd said it was something like 6 or 7 kilometres, but he didn't say that that's just one way. And actually it was like,
it was an outback?
And it's like a kilometre like elevation gain or something ridiculous, and it was winter. But once I've committed, I'm going to get to the top. Like, even though he'd be like, we'll turn around at any time, we can turn around at any time, I'm like, no, I'm fine, I'll meet you there, like, kind of a thing. And then we got to the bottom, and I was so tired. I got in the truck, fine, and we decided to stop to get a cup of tea on the way back, and I jumped out of the truck, and my legs just were like, boom. I couldn't walk for about 2 days. Wow. And so, I will push myself to
and it is a little bit to do with that self-forgetting. It's like once they kind of get on, it's almost like they're on the treadmill and they can't find the stop button. They just keep going and going and going. So I think that once they get mobilized, they can do it in a couple of ways, with the no and with a yes. Okay, this is actually one of my favorite questions that I'm going to ask you, because something recent just happened that really is about this question with the two of us. How easy or difficult is it for you to say no?
Very difficult for me to say no, because I
don't even want to be here right
now. It's very difficult to say no. For a lot of reasons, I think. Sometimes it's because in my head I'm like, well, I could enjoy it. I also don't want to say no because I don't want to disappoint somebody. Don't want to let somebody down.
Does that have to do with the conflict bit?
Yeah. Don't want to let someone down. Don't want to be in conflict with somebody. I'd hate to think that somebody was like, well, disappointed with me, or didn't like me as a result of me saying no. I don't like offending people, even though I have opinions about offence, but I still wouldn't want to do it to somebody. So there's a lot that goes on in my head before I actually say the word no.
And is it something you're working on, and do you have any recent examples?
I have a few recent examples, but one being turning up for the 108 sun salutations. And I suppose that whole event really was very 9 of me, because I, on a bit of a whim, decided to go in the morning. I'd not really planned it, just kind of got up and was like, this is happening, I'll go down. It'll be nice to see some people. I got there and was asked if I'd like to teach, because one of the teachers, and I panicked and said, no, I just want to take part. And then it took about 60 sun salutations for me to get over the guilt and actually give myself a little credit for saying no. Because if I'd have messed something up, or if I'd have done something wrong or said something wrong, I wasn't in any way prepared.
Right.
Which isn't always a bad thing for me.
You mentioned that before we came.
Yeah, it's not always a bad thing for me, but I just knew that it would have been a bit too much pressure for me to fail. And then doing the whole thing, I tried for as long as I could to stay in the shade.
Yes.
Because I didn't want to move from my mat. I wanted to do the whole thing because I, again, don't want to let people down. Didn't want to disrupt, didn't want to ruin anyone else's experience. And as a result of not moving, I got a little...
You got a little pinky.
Just a little sunburn.
And what I think was pretty remarkable about that story is we met for... Oh, no, maybe you told me right directly after, but you told me right away that... Well, first of all, you told me right away no.
Yeah.
And not that I didn't care, but I was just like, okay, I was just trying to formulate like who was going to go next, and if you were going to come in, great. If you weren't... And I think that's good for you to hear, is that it didn't matter to us.
Yeah.
We just were looking to solve a problem, right? We didn't sort of think, oh, that Katie, or we could use her and look at her down there being so selfish. Like, no one thought that. But what I thought was great about you telling me that it took you 60 sun salutations to get over the guilt of saying no, just the fact that you told me that.
Yeah.
Is you working on that? How difficult is it for you to say no piece for you? And I think you've had a few other things just lately, work-wise, that you don't have to share. That one was a personal one for us, where when you are firm and when you are direct, it's possible and it's okay.
Yeah.
And that none of us think any differently of you. You know that expression where we think people think less of us than we think they do, or something like that. If we knew the amount that people were actually thinking about us, we'd be surprised.
Yeah.
Like, we are all self-absorbed. I don't care what your number is. We all think of us first. But when we say no, usually this person is just looking to solve something. And whether it's you or whether it's the next person, it's not really about that direct person. And so it kind of gives us the freedom to say that no, or to know that it's okay. And it wasn't a selfish moment. You showed up to an event to partake in it. Yeah. You know, and it was funny because all of the teacher trainers that Katie had trained with, or some of them, were going to be teaching. And it was them that said, oh, Katie's here, let's ask her. And I, knowing her fairly well, thought, no, I don't want to put her on the spot. I know she's practicing some of these things. And then I think one of the teachers said, well, let's just ask Katie. And then I did ask you. And I thought, okay, we'll just see what comes of this. And I thought it worked out perfectly, and it gave both of us, me to ask and you to say no.
I was on a bit of a roll that week for saying no.
Yeah, you were. Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely aspects of myself about being firm, being bossy.
It's like a muscle you have to try on.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. I don't like it.
Yeah.
And especially at the moment with this new COVID experience, that the goalposts have moved,
really,
and there's new roles in place that need to be adhered to, and so I'm finding that I have to be a little bit more authoritative, and it's not in a mean way. It's just that there's like this extra layer of responsibility for me personally, that now I have to take care of, and unfortunately the way that I have to do that is by being like, no, this has to happen. I can't take any more different opinions right now. It has to happen this way.
And I think 9s would do themselves well, or any number that maybe struggles with conflict or saying no, or letting people down. 2s would be in that category. I would put 4s in there too, and I'd also put 5s in there. To practice saying no in a way where it doesn't sound like you're a complete jerk. Because, you know, anything that we don't do a lot, we don't do very well, right? So when we practice just a little teeny no, like to your friend Jody, right, versus a big no that's maybe a work thing or something in your extended family, you know, or in the in-laws, right, where we want to have some confidence with saying no, so that we can be fair, but also not come off like just a big hot mess when you're like, no, I'm not doing that, and going on a bit of a rant, right?
No.
Because I think, you know, when 9s do start doing that, because it is so seldom, that it just isn't something that's embodied. So to just try these little bits and pieces of saying no to small things. I was recently in a conversation this week where some lady said, if it's not a hell yes, then it's a heck no. Right? And then there's just one or the other. If it doesn't feel like it's something that you really want to do and it's going to be in good flow and in tune with you, then it's just a heck no. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll leave it there for now, and we'll catch up with Katie again in part 2, where we'll talk about the 3 different types of 9s and how the instinct will start to interplay with the overall dominant number of 9, and how we get 3 very different 9s. And we'll catch up with Katie in part 2, and yeah, we'll leave it there.